we could get started. Okay. I'm gonna let my politicians close the deal. All right, everybody. Thank you all for showing up to our Houma stop of the 2026 To the People, For the People Democratic Roadshow. The whole purpose of the roadshow was to make sure that every aspect of the state, every constituency in the Democratic Party got an opportunity to see the Democrats who are actually running for office, who are actually asking you for their vote. Is this something that the party should be doing? Probably. But more importantly, this is something that I think Democratic voters should be engaging with, especially now. As everybody knows, this week, the Supreme Court ruling in Calais allowed for Louisiana to essentially go full bore in trying to gerrymander the congressional districts here in the state. Right in its crosshairs is the 6th congressional district. If you know me from anything, I ran for it 2 years ago. That is the second majority black district that was created specifically because Louisiana showed a history of racial gerrymandering. And so the SIC 360 that we have now made is that racial gerrymandering is the reason why the governor would like to he'd like to redraw the maps, even though ballots have already gone out for mail-in balloting, and early voting starts tomorrow. It is more important than ever that not only we as Democrats, but we as voters actually express our will and actually show up. What I've been telling people is no matter what they tell you on May 16th and starting tomorrow, still cast your vote. Still show up, still cast your vote in the U.S. House races. That is why your House candidates are here today. They're here to ask you for your vote. They're here to tell you what their plans are to turn our country around. And their name is on the ballot, and they deserve your consideration, and they deserve your vote on May 16th. So do not be discouraged. Don't let anything that you're hearing from Landry, from Merle, from any of the Louisiana Republicans discourage you from making your voice known in the next couple of weeks. And, God forbid we have a runoff in June, but vote in every election that's on the calendar this year because our freedom depends on it. Today, it looks like what we have is we have our Senate candidates. We have Nick Albares and Gary Crockett. I do not know if Jamie Davis is going to be able to make it, but if he is, you'll see him up here. And then we have our 3rd congressional district candidates, Tia LeBrun, Caleb Walker, and I know that John Day said that he was not going to be able to make it today. But if you are able to make it to Lake Charles tomorrow, John Day will be there. So if you'd like to see your candidates again, you can always travel with us and spend the gas money on it. Trying to think of anything else. Oh, I do want to thank all of our partners who have helped put this roadshow together. My name is Quentin Anderson. I'm with the Bayou Progressive, but I've been doing this alongside some really incredible organizations and people. Indivisible, Acadiana has been helping us. 10,000 Women, Melissa Flournoy, who's largely been doing this job that I'm doing right now for all of these because I'm usually behind the camera. We've been working with, who were the other?
Indivisible.
We had Indivisible, Acadiana. We've had Indivisibles all over the state. The Young Democrats are partnered to us. The LGBTQ caucus of the Democratic Party is partnered to us in the Forum for Equality Louisiana. And so all of these organizations came together. We're not getting paid for this. We haven't been fundraising for this. We've been doing this with bubblegum and paper clips. But we've been doing it because we do believe that our democracy is that important and we want to bring these candidates to you. And so I hope that what you hear today, you will take back to your communities. I am guessing that if you are here, you are the people that care about politics at the last minute ask for your opinion. And so tell them what you heard here today. Tell them that you heard from really great candidates, but most importantly, tell them that no matter who emerges out of the primary in this cycle, all of them are better than the Republican candidates that'll be on the ballot in November. And so thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. We look forward to getting some of your questions as we get towards the end of this. We have a few moderated questions by Bonnie Ryland, who's going to be our moderator today. But otherwise, just enjoy meeting our candidates, asking them questions, poke, prod, lift the hood, all that jazz. Thank you all. Oh, and just housekeeping. As candidates, when you guys are up here, speaking to the mic, even though it's not amplifying anything, I just need to get clean audio. All right, y'all.
So you want to pull both the Senate candidates up, huh?
Sorry. If I can please have the U.S. Senate candidates, Nick Albares and Gary Crockett, come up. We'll start with the Senate candidates.
Thank you. All right, Gary. See you again.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
So we're going to get started with our opening question, and this event is happening in a strange political moment. Early voting is about to begin. Ballots have already been mailed, and now voters are being told that at least some races may not count because of a legal and political fight that they did not create. In a moment like this, what do you tell voters who already feel like politics is rigged against them? And we'll start with Mr. Crockett.
I would say, as Quentin said earlier, that each voter should vote. Exercise your right. Your vote is currency, and if you don't use it, it's no longer useful. So I say to everyone, vote.
Mr. Albares?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad to be with you all. I'm Nick Albares, and I'm running for U.S. Senate. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 3 young boys. And, when I got into this race, I said a big part of it is that I want to show my kids a different example from what they're seeing in Washington and what they're seeing in Baton Rouge right now. Because what we're seeing right now is the most anti-democratic chaos since the era of Jim Crow. And right now, voters are being suppressed. Votes have been cast in this election. Votes have been cast. And now Jeff Landry wants to rip those votes from voters. And if y'all have been watching what's been going on, sadly, this isn't new. Because Jeff Landry worked to push out the duly elected clerk of court in Orleans Parish. He eliminated the positions of black judges in Orleans Parish. And now he's trying to eliminate the seat of Representative Cleo Fields. And so it's imperative that we all stand together against this. It's imperative that we come together and unite, and that we stay apprised of every new part of the news, because it feels like the news is happening so fast. There's going to be lawsuits. There already are lawsuits that are happening. But the main thing is we do need to come out and vote and show that we have the power as the people, that we're able to make a change, and that these leaders who are trying to undermine the will of the voters, they won't have the last word.
We have a brief follow-up to that. Mr. Crockett, what would you say is the line between a legal dispute over the maps and outright voter disenfranchisement?
Well, the problem with the maps is that they're like squiggly lines, which shows that they are intentionally trying to disenfranchise those that are in certain areas. We have 6 seats in Congress, and it's very easy to draw that map. We have 6 population densities here in the state, which could take care of that. We have Shreveport area, we have Monroe area, we have Alexandria, we have Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and we have Southwest, which is Lafayette and Lake Charles. Very easy map without the squiggly lines. We should not have a district that reaches from Shreveport down through the central part of Louisiana.
So let's be clear about what's going on here. Quentin mentioned this in the opening. The true racial gerrymander was the districts that were drawn before, that were designed to withhold black power of the vote. That was the racial gerrymander. And then what happened was Jeff Landry wanted to get rid of Garrett Graves. And so the state, let's be clear, the state defended these maps initially before the courts, but it was a bait and switch. They knew all along they wanted to come back and throw this district out. And so when the state is comprised of 1/3 of black voters, we need to make sure that representation exists. So yes, there is a need for fair maps, But let's be very clear about what's going on. The racial gerrymander was what was happening before, when the franchise for black voters was taken away. And what we need right now is a restoration to make sure that true representation exists in this state and across the country.
Let's talk about something a little bit more local for this area. Coastal Louisiana is usually treated like a photo op after storms and a budget line during the campaign season. If you're in the U.S. Senate, what is one specific federal fight that you would pick for coastal communities like Terrebonne and Lafourche that you do not think Louisiana's current senators have fought hard enough for? Mr. Albares, can we start with you?
Yep. So I think we need to fight for our sediment diversions. We know that sediment is what builds our coast, and we need to make sure that that's done in an inclusive way that includes our communities. And also, one of the most important jobs of a United States Senator is confirming judges. And we just had a case where the Supreme Court moved coastal lawsuits from state courts, where they belong, in my view, to the federal court system. Now, we shouldn't have judges in areas all around this country deciding what's happening to our coast. We need to hold people accountable that are ravishing our coast. And so that is something that I will be attuned to ensure that every judge that comes before me understands the separation of powers and makes sure that our state courts are empowered with those coastal lawsuits. Because any industry that creates damage to our coast, they should be responsible for paying to clean it up and to bolster our coast, because the coast is what protects all of us from here throughout southeast Louisiana.
Thank you. Mr. Crockett?
So on the local level, it is time for each parish to have some jurisdiction of its coast. Right now, the Louisiana coasts are a shell of what they were just 15 years ago. I think it's important on the federal side that we have legislation that allows each parish that is coastal to have jurisdiction to allow their own permitting or business license for those industries that come in. Not at the state level, because that is the problem now. The parishes don't make them have a business license as they require of any other business within its jurisdiction. That is what is going to save the coast.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, and we'll start with Mr. Albares, would you be willing to hold up unrelated federal priorities to force action on coastal protection, flood insurance, or disaster recovery?
Yes, I would, because it's vital for Louisiana. Because this is an existential question. Whether we can all stay and live here in southeast Louisiana. If we don't have our coast, we don't have our homes. And so I would, first of all, co-sponsor the Natural Disaster Risk Reinsurance Act that's in Congress so that we can bring down the cost of homeowners and flood insurance and make sure that the NFIP is solvent. We need to tackle rising costs across the board, but we know that homeowners insurance is critical because, look, here's the reality. Disasters don't just happen in Louisiana. From California wildfires to inland flooding to tornadoes in the heartland, all parts of this country are impacted by natural disasters. So we need to create insurance pools where everyone is in the system so that when a Hurricane Ida comes through, it doesn't just raise rates for people of this community, but we all share in keeping costs down for people. And so absolutely, I would use every tool in the federal toolkit to make sure that our coast is protected, to make sure that we're able to bring down insurance costs, and to bring people together to come up with solutions.
All right. Thank you.
Will you repeat the question, please? The follow-up question.
Would you be willing to hold up unrelated federal priorities to force action on coastal protection, flood insurance, or disaster recovery?
Yes.
And next, we'll go, let's see, whose turn is it to go first? Let's go with you, Mr. Crockett. A lot of working people here do not experience the economy through the stock market. They experience the economy through insurance premiums, grocery prices, utility bills, rent, and whether their kid can afford to stay in Louisiana. What is the first affordability issue that you would try to move federal policy on, and what would your proposal actually do?
The first would be no taxes on food. We have quite a few states where you don't pay taxes on food. Those that are poor, and I grew up in Tallulah, Louisiana, which is poverty. You spend everything that you make just to make it. And I think some of you could have more food if you weren't paying it on taxes. In addition to that, it is time that we have higher wages to help meet some of that burden, meaning $15 an hour. And it wouldn't happen all at once. It would happen in increments, like $2 per year, which would allow the companies to ramp up and strategize on their corporate strategy, but also will allow these families to get a leg up. These are the policies that I think would give some immediate help, which would allow people to pay more for their insurance, which would allow them to pay more for health care and other things that they need in their everyday life.
So I think the number one priority is holding this administration accountable. And it's Congress doing its job. And that touches a variety of policy issues, both domestic and international. So one that I'm really concerned about is Medicaid. The Medicaid program is set to be slashed by $1 trillion starting January 1st, 2027. This was part of the big ugly bill that Congress passed to give tax breaks to billionaires and slash Medicaid. A major part of my campaign and a major part of my work as a senator will be to do everything in my power to reverse those cuts and make sure they never go into effect. At the same time, we have to make sure that we hold the executive branch accountable with their trade policy, because the reckless trade war has caused prices to go up. We need targeted tariffs. And I think it makes sense to have tariff policies that protect our shrimpers, because imported shrimp are flooding the market here in Louisiana, but not across the board, which hurts everyone and just raises prices. And then what about the real wars? This war in Iran is costing the country $1 billion a day. And since the conflict began, the price of gas has gone up by more than 40%. We need Congress to do its job and be the one to actually provide war authorization through the War Powers Act. And so I would, through all of those things, hold Congress accountable. And I agree that we need to raise the minimum wage. We need to more than double it. And I also believe we need to index it to inflation, so that as costs go up, it automatically goes up, so that we're not coming back to Congress every year trying to get it raised. Because the minimum wage was last increased 16 years ago, and Congress is failing at its job.
Thank you. As a follow-up on affordability, Mr. Crockett, what would you say is something that Democrats talk about on affordability that you think does not land well with voters?
Well, my issue is that I don't hear much from Democrats on affordability. I really feel that the Democrats and Republicans have given our people a raw deal. I think there needs to be an overhaul of both systems. I think the Democrats give speeches, and in addition to giving speeches, there's just a lot of rhetoric. They're reactive instead of proactive. I think we need to change the party where we can actually activate when we have a good candidate and move forward with that candidate. Number one, by resources instantly. Give that candidate data so they can reach out to the people to find out exactly what they need. A lot of people don't vote because they don't feel heard. So it's one thing to say go out and vote. It's another thing to actually put your finger on what is bothering me at that time. If we have more people to vote, it would only be because those senators, representatives, and other politicians reach out and form a real relationship with the people.
Thank you.
So I do think regarding affordability, we have to make sure that we are in touch with voters throughout the state. You know, I have an acronym that I like to use that describes my leadership style, and the acronym is LEAD. Listen, engage, act, and deliver. And so I want to be in every community throughout this state, listening to people, because I hear the concerns over and over. High insurance costs, lack of affordable health care, and fears about it getting even more unaffordable. High rents and high grocery prices. These are all real concerns that every person in communities across the state experience in different ways. And for me, it's important to be there. You know, my career has been in nonprofit organizations for the most part, along with time in government serving as a policy advisor for Governor John Bel Edwards. And when I worked with Catholic Charities, when I worked with Volunteers of America, a big part of that work was inserting myself into communities throughout the state and saying, what are the needs that we have here, and how can we innovatively build programs that meet those needs? And so being in the United States Senate would give me a broader forum to bring people together, to bring federal resources and community resources to bear to tackle the affordability challenges that we face throughout the state of Louisiana.
Thank you. This one's going to go to you first.
All right.
All right. Houma and Terrebonne sit at the intersection of oil and gas, fisheries, coastal restoration, and climate risk. National Democrats often talk about climate in ways that can sound abstract or disconnected from workers whose families depend on energy jobs. How do you talk about climate and energy in a way that does not insult people who work in those industries?
That's an important question, and it gets at this question that I was just talking about. You know, we have to be present in communities to actually listen to people and not just give talking points that are not related to people's real lived experience. And so I'm proud to have the support of labor in this campaign, and labor and jobs are really critical. At the same time, we see prices going up across the board, as we've talked about, and that includes energy prices. And what we're seeing at the federal level is this yo-yo effect, where, you know, during the Biden administration, there was a lot of investment in renewable energy and renewable energy production, and that's been halted during the Trump administration. Here in Louisiana, and especially here in Terrebonne, Lafourche, you know, we have energy infrastructure, and there was a lot of excitement and energy towards creating the infrastructure necessary for good renewable jobs. And so as we go through this clean energy transition, it needs to be one where we do focus and center workers while also centering our environment and our coast, as we've talked about before. So this takes all aspects. It has to be a holistic strategy that includes workers, that includes the environment, and that includes, first and foremost, getting the input of the communities as we move towards a clean energy future.
Mr. Crockett?
I believe that our health is our wealth. Not the industry that is here, but our health should be the first priority. So before we consider any industry, the first thing we should consider is, how is this going to affect the lives of the people in this region? How is it going to affect the water? How is it going to affect their health? We have Cancer Alley in a different area of the state. What we don't want down here is the same Cancer Alley. And we avoid that by putting in controls from the start to make sure that this community stays not only great as far as the salaries they have, but their health as well. Because if you make it all just to spend it on your health later, that's a waste. We need to think about our future. Our future meaning that our kids and their kids. We have to take care of this environment while we take care of the industry as well. So we have to make sure that we have standards that preserve our people first before it's preserving that industry.
All right, thank you. We'll move along now, and Mr. Crockett, this one will go to you first. The recent oil leak put parts of Terrebonne's seafood economy in limbo and raised questions from crabbers, shrimpers, dock owners, oyster harvesters about communication and accountability. What should the federal government's role be when environmental damage hits small fishing communities faster than the bureaucracy responds?
So before industry receive permits going forward, we need to make sure that any damage they do, they pay for it in whole. And what I mean by that, residual payments as well. So in other words, if they come in and there's an oil spill, it affects the shrimpers. The shrimpers should receive everything that they received the past year plus some percentage. In addition to that, all those support companies as well should receive the same. The same thing that happened during the BP oil spill, but it was only because of court. What we want to do is make sure that there's teeth in legislation that requires that they pay for any damage that occurs during their work. In other words, we just want them to be good stewards. Leave it better than you found it. Leave it better than you found it for the future.
We do need to ensure that there's compensation for anyone who's impacted by any type of oil leak and environmental degradation that impacts shrimp, fish, oysters. And we need federal legislation that ensures that that compensation is robust. During the BP oil spill, I was with Catholic Charities, and I worked to bring oystermen, shrimpers together and to advocate for that compensation, to advocate to ensure that it was robust. And that's what we must do in every instance, because industry has to clean up the mess that they make. And we need to ensure that they're giving back to this community and not making it worse off than before they were here. And so it's critically important that our regulatory agencies have the authority to implement the regulations that are on the books, because too often we may have good laws in place, we may even have the regulations, but the Environmental Protection Agency and here at the state, LDEQ, the people that are actually enforcing those, they're kept back from actually doing their job. And so we need to ensure that our career professionals in those agencies are empowered. You know, when I was in graduate school, I moved from New Orleans up to Washington, D.C. to go to graduate school at Georgetown University. And during that time, I had the honor to have a fellowship at the White House, and it was with the White House Council on Environmental Quality. And I got to see the tremendous professionals that exist at the EPA and the work that they're doing to try to protect communities around this country. But they can only do their job if they're allowed to, and we need Congress providing oversight on the administration to ensure that that's happening.
As a quick follow-up, Mr. Crockett, should penalties from spills be structured to directly compensate affected local industries and not just disappear into general enforcement or restoration funds?
Right, so compensation should go to the people. They should not go into any general fund account or anything else. What has to be set up is a separate department here in Louisiana specifically for that purpose, because no matter what there's going to be another spill. Along with the contracts, we should already delineate how far down those funds will go and how fast they will be spent as well. Because we need two things. We need compensation that is going to be spent immediate, and we also need a reserve fund, not for politicians, not for administration, but to be used for the residual effects that we don't know of during the first years of the spill.
Yes, I think it needs to be a both and. It needs to go directly to people, direct compensation, and then we need the funds in order to remediate the mess.
Mr. Albares, Louisiana has a habit of electing politicians who say they are pro-family and then voting for policies that make it harder to afford health care, child care, housing, and insurance. What would a genuinely pro-family federal agenda look like for Louisiana?
That's a critically important question because you hear about family values a lot from my Republican opponents, and what you hear about, but what you also hear about is $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts, and you hear about cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. So, I believe that the first step is restoring those cuts, the $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, the cuts to SNAP, but it also means making key investments. When we demand that billionaires pay their fair share, we can provide a universal paid family leave program so that people can stay home from work when they have a new child or when they have a sick relative. We can create a universal child care assistance program so that kids can receive that education in those most formative years, 0 to 3 years old and up to 5, before they enter kindergarten. It comes back to priorities. When we can send people to outer space, when we send billions of dollars to Iran and all of these tax breaks and loopholes for billionaires, then we can do what it takes to invest in our people. We already talked about the minimum wage, but just to mention a few other things. We need to bring back the enhanced child tax credit. During the Biden administration, that cut child poverty in half. Who can argue with cutting child poverty in half? And they let that expire. We need, and I would be a co-sponsor of the Fresh Food Act, which provides support for grocery stores coming into food deserts in underserved areas. We need to protect renters and investigate corporate landlords and see if they're engaging in price gouging. So I could go on for a while because there's so much that we need, but it comes back to the issue of priorities. And to me, every person has dignity, and our public policy really ought to reflect that.
Thank you.
Will you repeat your question, please?
Louisiana has a habit of electing politicians who say they are pro-family and then voting for policies that make it harder to afford health care, child care, housing, and insurance. What would a genuinely pro-family federal agenda look like for Louisiana?
Louisiana is at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to states. We're 50th in the majority of the categories and in the high 40s in the others. So the first thing that we would do is let's look at where we're on the bottom. And where we're on the bottom, we need to have legislation that changes that. What is it going to take to lift Louisiana up? Because as we already know, as Louisiana goes, America goes. When it comes to food, again, we need to eliminate the tax. We need to eliminate burdens that we have on the people of Louisiana. And we do that by, number one, having a state minimum wage, and that's the problem with it. We don't have one. We have a federal minimum wage, where other states have a state minimum wage as well. In addition to that, we would take care of our coast. We would take care of our people that are in Cancer Alley. We would change some of the industries that we have here. Number one, we will make the oil industry and chemical industry more robust and safe, but we will also introduce other industries here. Not through carbon sequestration, which only generate between 50 and 100 jobs, not data centers that only produce between about 100 permanent jobs. And along with that, you have environmental concerns, you have noise concerns, you have electricity concerns. We pay more electricity than most states around us. That has to change. And in addition to that, it is our dollars that are building the grid. If our dollars are going to build a grid, we need to be compensated for that. Instead of Entergy having large bonuses for their executives, that needs to come back to the people. Wherever public dollars are used, the public should benefit from that as well. So it's time to change things away from policies that don't have teeth in it to actually making sure that the people benefit from everything that happens in this state. It's time for the system to work for the people that work.
All right, thank you. A quick follow-up on that, Mr. Albares. What part of that pro-family federal agenda would you fight for, even if it annoyed National Party leadership?
You know, that's an interesting question. Because I'm going to fight for this whole agenda. I will fight, as I said earlier, for the Natural Disaster Risk Reinsurance Act. You know, insurance was a part of that. And I think that we need really specific legislation to fix the insurance crisis. And we need to get into the details. And I would be making the case for how that would be a good bill for everyone. But I think that, you know, the big part about this is, you know, I'm ready to do the work no matter who is in leadership, no matter who is in the White House. It's about bringing people together around shared values, because I believe that everyone really wants the same thing. And it's about how do we do the work to get there. So I tell people, look, I go to every community and listen, not get defensive at all about anything, but say, look, I think that everybody wants to walk out of their house onto a safe street. Everybody wants to be able to have good health care. We all want to breathe clean air and drink clean water. And everybody wants a good job with a solid wage. And we want great schools for our kids with highly trained, well-compensated teachers. And we want to be able to exist where we live and have a future that our kids can live. So those are the things that I'm going to be fighting for, and I'm going to work with anybody who's ready to do the work, to put in the work, to create policies that bring us closer to that reality.
Well, I'm a little different there. I don't believe that the current leadership want the same things that we want. We wouldn't be in the mess that we're in if they did. I don't believe that they want health care for everyone. That's why they took away the ACA subsidies. I don't think they want us to be healthy because they would be doing something about Cancer Alley. They don't want us to have a great education. That's why they got rid of the Department of Education. They do not want us to live at peace because that's why we have a Department of War now. And as a 24-year Navy veteran, I know better. So this is what I would do. I wouldn't sign a single piece of legislation where there isn't something in it for the people. Whatever legislation that comes up for vote, my first question is, what's in it for the people? I don't want to see legislation for industries. I don't want to see it for public, private interests and special interests. I need to see something in there for the people of Louisiana. And that's what I would look for first, and that is what I will vote on. If you can't put something in there for the people of Louisiana, you can't get my vote, no matter which side of the aisle you're from. Because unfortunately, our leadership, Democratic and Republican, They decided that their shared values are about large companies and not about the people of Louisiana, and that needs to stop.
We have time for one more question. And Mr. Crockett, we'll go with you. What is one issue where you think your own party is either afraid to speak plainly or is speaking in a way that normal people do not understand? Either afraid to speak plainly or is speaking in a way that normal people do not understand.
Well, that would be on affordability, number one. The reason why we're in this mess is because their messaging was all off. And the reason why the messaging was off is because their hearts were off. If you really feel that you love the people of this country, your messaging would speak to that. If you can't come to someone's table and sit down and really talk about the everyday life of what really matters, there's no way that you can go and write legislation or vote in the right way as well, because you're out of touch. Most of the people that go up to Congress, they don't go because they want good jobs for everyone. Most of them go up there because they couldn't get a good job and want to live off of the dollars of legislation. As an owner of 4 businesses, I know what it takes in order to create jobs. Most of them that go up there, they don't go to create jobs. They send down slush money, which doesn't really make a difference or an impact. Those things need to change in both their messaging as well as their action.
So I think that the issue here with the party is being out of touch with working people, everyday people, and the struggles that really exist. Policy doesn't just happen in think tanks. It needs to happen on the streets of our cities, our towns, our villages, because that's where people are. And so, as I stated earlier, being with, building true community, and listening is key. I'm really proud to be the only candidate in this race to be endorsed by labor. And that means a lot to me because I know that we need our unions in order to bring forward the dignity of work. We need to be in this fight for working people throughout this state. We need to be able to listen to the concerns that working people have. Yes, there's a place for business and innovation and entrepreneurship, and we need to encourage that so that everyone can fulfill their highest potential. And we need to remember that in a rapidly changing economy, we have to center working families and provide the resources necessary for people to live and thrive here in Louisiana.
We'll do our closing statements now. So, Mr. Crockett, if you would go first, please.
I'm Gary Crockett. I'm from Tallulah, Louisiana. I live in New Orleans now. I'm a 24-year Navy veteran and a business owner. I'm not here seeking endorsements. I'm here seeking votes. I don't have the endorsements of others because I'm a real person. I haven't worked with other politicians that have failed you. I know you want different. I am different. Vote for Gary Crockett for a difference in your life.
All right, I'm going to try to speak up. Can y'all hear me in the back? Okay, I'm blowing out Quentin's ears. Yeah. I'll lower the mic. All right, y'all can hear me in the back? All right, so I'm Nick Albares, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate because what I saw on the Republican side was everybody fighting to be closest to Donald Trump. And my promise to you is that I'm working to be closest to the people. Because on the other side, they've slashed Medicaid to the tune of $1 trillion. With Governor Edwards, I fought to protect Medicaid expansion at the state legislature. This is a fight that I've been in and won, and I'm ready to get in the fight again. So I'm ready to go on day one. I'm ready to be in the fight with you and for you in Washington, D.C. We will not let up until every person's dignity is recognized and honored. Because in this country, we have been torn apart by the politics of division and hatred. Y'all, I love Louisiana, and I love each and every one of you who is here. And in this election, on May 16th, we are going to begin the work of bringing people together, to unite, to realize a future that is bright for my 3 boys and children around this great state. Because we need a world filled of hope, where America is leading again, where America is building again, and where we are able to realize our highest potential. I'm Nick Albares. I'm #1 on your ballot, and I would be honored to earn your vote. Thank you so much.